We're going to talk recruiting here with Danny West from HawgSports.com. I hear the Razorbacks signed a pretty darn good recruit for a Saturday night in April. Garth Brooks.
Yeah.
Going to be Garth Brooks has signed to play in the spring with this Arkansas football team. Danny, that's a lot different. I don't think there's ever been a live concert inside Donald W. Reynolds Stadium or even in Bud Walton Arena. So it's a little different for the football stadium, but man, I don't know anybody that wouldn't at least be looking forward to something like that.
Well, he's only verbally committed to it, right? I mean, he hasn't signed yet, so you got to keep him.
Can he sign early signing day 3 weeks? Is that when he puts pen to paper?
Yeah.
I mean, who are his other two schools in his top three? We need to know.
That's right.
Well, that's Garth, so probably Oklahoma State, and who knows. But, no, that's a good deal, man. When is that, April? I'm trying to think.
April 23rd.
23rd, yeah.
Yeah, what that might coincide with as far as recruiting. I guess they would typically, I think they're going to be able to have kids on campus. So who knows, maybe you can make a recruiting deal out of it. Obviously, couldn't give them tickets or anything like that. But if they're in town, they like Garth, there's your opportunity, I reckon.
Man, I remember when Garth Brooks came through the Pioneer League. You played in Billings, Montana. This would have been 1998. I'm working with a baseball team in Helena, Montana. And he played in Billings.
It's a big deal in 98.
He took batting practice with the Billings Mustangs that year. The dude loves baseball. But let's get into football here, Danny. And
Sure.
you could essentially have, I know it's not an unlimited roster, but the seniors, the super seniors, or those who use the extra year of eligibility from the COVID season, it didn't count against roster counters for this year. Moving forward, though, for next year, that's not the case. So I only ask that because now we just hear yesterday from Sam Pittman, Dalton Wagner is not going to walk for the senior day ceremony, so you would assume he's coming back for another season. And the more seniors that decide to come back, that counts against the roster next season. So now you do have to worry about the math, in which case this last year you didn't.
That's right, and that's what makes it tricky, right? I mean, you got so many spots that you're trying to fill up, but you want to fill them accordingly and adequately, right? I mean, it's a numbers game at this point. You've got to be pretty selective in terms of who you invite back. If there's a 6-year potential super senior on your current roster and maybe you think you can get a better player via the transfer portal or, a high school kid that obviously is going to have 4 years of eligibility, I think you've got some tough decisions to make there. I think there's 7 or 8 guys that potentially, and you mentioned one there, Dalton Wagner, potentially could come back for another year. I mean, we could try to run through them, but Wagner, Joe Fouché is in there, Buster Brown, Bumper Poole, Shane Clennon, Jordan Silver, and there's 1 or 2 more there that I'm mistaken here. I don't have them written down. I apologize, but that's a pretty good group. I think obviously if Joe Fouché and Buster wanted to come back and Bumper, I mean, you got to take them, but there are some questions about some other guys if they're going to move on or how it might play out. And sure, I don't envy the guys for, first of all, having to make those decisions, and secondly, having to wait until those decisions are made by the players before they even know how many spots they've got available, for this year's recruiting class. So a little bit of a different challenge this year. I'm sure they've got a fine game plan on how to attack it and how it's going to play out. But I'm as curious as anybody in terms of, how many spots do you have? It's kind of been unclear all calendar year. So we're getting down to it now after the season. I guess after this Missouri game on Friday, we'll be able to potentially start finding out who's coming back and who's moving on.
Some might try to read between the lines when Coach Pittman openly on his radio show last week, talked about trying to talk to Dalton Wagner about coming back. And, he's played really well at right tackle, and that's such an important position on the offensive line. I know Coach Pittman really values his tackles, but on the other side, at left tackle, Myron Cunningham is out of eligibility. So who of the young guys do you think could step into that role next year? A Jalen St. John, a Tykeus Crawford. Do you think either of those guys might be ready next year?
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth. Those would be my 2 guesses. A guy that I'm still curious about, Phil, is Marcus Henderson. He played a little bit last year as a true freshman. Really haven't heard much from him since, have we? So I think he's a guy that He's right there with St. John and Crawford in terms of, first of all, he's versatile. I know they liked him initially at tackle, so we'll see if he can handle that. But he's a guy that's moved around a little bit already, and we just haven't seen a whole lot from him. So those two that you mentioned there would be my first two guesses. Obviously, Tykeist is he's behind Dalton at right tackle. We would have to see if he can make that transition to left. And I think he's always played right tackle, if I'm not mistaken. Now, Crawford could correct me on that if I'm wrong, but just, trying to remember his film, I've always seen him at right tackle. So a little bit of a different deal on the left side, but yeah, you nailed it. Those would be the two candidates, and I think they're happy with those two. We just haven't had a chance to see them out there a whole lot. So the spring would be really valuable for both, and who knows, maybe there's somebody else that we're not even thinking of yet that could potentially come in. And we would have to wait and see if the transfer portal, if there's a hands-down starter that they could go get. I know their needs on defensive line and at linebacker, and in my opinion, I think they could use a corner that could come in and start right away. But, if there's a hands-down, sure enough starter that could come in day one and take a job like that, I think you have to roll the dice and take him. Obviously, you would need to feel really, really good about that, but time will tell if that guy exists in the portal.
Mm-hmm. Is there anybody in the portal as of now? I know the 5-star guy from LSU entered either yesterday or late last week into the portal. Is anybody in the transfer portal right now that you see as a big target for Arkansas?
Yeah, I think there's a few, but, I'm not ready to mention specific names. I do think there are some linebackers that they've, I'm not even going to say made contact with, but I think could be strong candidates to, we could see some movement there. I think edge rushers and interior defensive linemen obviously have to be way, way up on their board. Linebacker, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, if Buster moves on, and guys, I think he's having the type of year, Buster catches a lot of flack. Now, he's had a really good year, in my opinion. He keeps coming up with these timely turnovers, huge plays, and huge situations. I think he's done enough this year to potentially set himself up and have a good run at it in the at the next level. So we'll have to wait and see on that and wait on his grades to come back and what he's hearing. But I would anticipate him moving on if I had to guess right now. So you look at the cornerback spot, I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't feel great about it unless, maybe you develop somebody. Is there a Chase Lowry in there that's doing really well as a scout team guy, or a Kewan Parker? Maybe one of those guys emerges. You're bringing in a Jalen Lewis in this year's class, 2022 class, really heavily recruited kid out of Tennessee. He's got the length and the athleticism to jump in, but that's a lot to ask, from a true freshman in this league. We would, I'd be curious if he could handle it, but I know he's a guy that they feel really good about. So somebody is either going to have to step up and develop in the spring and into fall camp next year, or, again, another spot where a transfer portal seems kind of attractive.
What about Devin Bush? That's a name that's,
man.
I mean, I think he's been out there, just a couple of games this year. I mean, he's kind of, I think a lot of people expected him to be a dude, and right now he's not even a name.
Yeah, it's wildly interesting to me. Every week we release the depth chart when Arkansas announces their depth chart, and I write his name every single week as a backup corner. And, typically you expect a backup corner to play quite a bit. At some point they're going to rotate in and get some playing time, but we never see the guy. And so, you bring up a good point there. I'm not sure what the deal is there. Maybe he's just not where they want him to be yet, but certainly a 4-star guy, had all the accolades coming out. There was a little bit of drama. They were trying to keep him. I think that was under the previous staff, Coach Morris and those guys. He decommitted, and he was all over the place. Didn't sign early, then he changed his mind. So it's kind of been a roller coaster from the get-go, and hopefully, it's going to even out, and at some point we get to see him. I always watch Twitter during the games, and I saw Scooter Harris was tweeting about Devin and kind of asking the same question the other night. Where is he at? Why doesn't he ever get to play, Especially in a game like that when you're giving up, 560, whatever it was.
Danny, what about as far as recruiting goes for Missouri? They pretty much done with official visits? Will there be official and unofficial visits on the Hill on Friday?
Going to have several unofficial. That's kids, obviously. For people that don't keep up with the terminology in recruiting, unofficial, of course, is when the kid pays his own way. Nothing's paid for. He gets free tickets. That's it. So they're going to have a bunch of those guys. I would anticipate several from the 2023 class. You know, you're already getting a head start, and that's the beauty of kind of filling up early for your current class. You can get a head start on those guys. They've done really well throughout the year. And I'd be willing to say right now, guys, just based on the momentum that they've carried into that class, and you look at all the visits they've gotten from that group so far, well, it sure seems to me they're going to have a heck of a class next year. Now, I'm not going to guarantee anything yet, but you look at the stars and the guys who have been on campus several times already, and they're coming back again for this game. That's shaping up to really be a promising class, in my opinion. So I think I've got four stars already confirmed, two of which are top 100 players in the country. That's unheard of around here. And a couple of those guys have already been here 2-3 times, so that's a positive thing. To answer your question on official visitors, the only one I'm aware of is next week. Okay, so you won't have a game, obviously, but that's Samuel Mbake. He's for the current class, obviously, not an official, but 2022 wide receiver Samuel Mbake out of Kennesaw, Georgia, North Cobb High School. It's a powerhouse program. They've developed, dozens, maybe hundreds of Division I signees through the years. So he's another one, about 6'3", 215, somewhere in there, really big kid. I think Arkansas wouldn't mind adding one more guy like that, a big physical target, especially, your chances of losing Burks are probably pretty high at this point, right? He's probably going to move on, so maybe you can go out and get a guy similar to him to come in and help out next year.
Mbake is an example of somebody that you'd have no crack at without Sam Pittman being your head coach, right? I would just assume that Coach Pittman recruited that high school really hard and has relationships with him, and this is a direct result of him being the coach, right?
Yeah, as well as Scott Fountain, Jimmy Smith, some other guys with Georgia ties. It really has opened up a lot of doors that maybe we're not even talking too much about. Everybody still wants to talk about what happens in Texas and Louisiana, and rightfully so, but they've really done well in picking up momentum in the state of Georgia. And if you ask me, there's just about nowhere else you'd rather recruit from. Maybe Louisiana. We've talked about this on this show in recent weeks, but Georgia is right up there as good as anybody, and there's so many, hundreds of them in Georgia. So a few of them are going to fall through the cracks, and you don't need them going off to Minnesota and Kentucky. They need to come to Arkansas, and Arkansas finally has a connection there, so they're starting to capitalize a little bit.
All right. Danny, we'll leave it there. Appreciate you, man. Have a great Thanksgiving holiday.
Thanks, Danny.
Thank you for the time that you've been giving us.
Thanks, you
too.
too.
Sir.
It's Danny West from HawgSports.com. Danny West 24/7 on Twitter. So give him a follow. Halftime's brought to you by Crabtree RV Center, our friends in Alma, Arkansas. The dealership that's been serving you in the River Valley in Northwest Arkansas for over 70 years. Crabtree RV Center features a 17-acre, 26,000-square-foot showroom floor, and it's at the junction of I-40 and I-49 beside the Cracker Barrel. You've driven by it before. You might have been there before. You know exactly where it is. Crabtree RV Center will help your family get the best experience choosing the right RV. And if you got a breakdown, the service and parts department takes care of you. Crabtree RV makes your family's dreams come true, and been doing it for over 70 years and 4 generations. You can look at the entire inventory at crabtreerv.com. First hour of halftime, going to wrap up right after this.
It's Thanksgiving, and we all know what that means. Football. And nothing goes better with football than turkey and betting. BetOnline has you covered for all the holiday season. More props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your #1 spot for all sports action this Thanksgiving. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus with the promo code BELIEVE to receive your bonus. That's BLEAV to receive your bonus. And it's not just football. BetOnline has pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, even your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all these amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports.